Peace. The God in me bows before the God in each one of you. That divine spark in me honors the divine spark in each one of you. I want to welcome you to another video in the series of Integrating the Sacred. And as I like to say, what we do is simple and simultaneously profound. By prayerfully contemplating the words and the person of Jesus, we endeavor to open ourselves up to God's light, to God's love, to God's grace, so that we can live a divine life here and now, and so that we can be a channel of God's light and love in the world. That's why we gather. Before I jump into today's reading and reflection, I want to humbly ask all of you to consider financially supporting this ministry. Some of you already do, and I appreciate that so much. I make no money from this ministry. It is truly a labor of love and joy. But any contribution that you make will allow us to continue and to improve on what we offer you. So in advance, thank you for your generosity. I deeply appreciate it. God bless you. Let me put the reading and everything I'm going to talk about today in a context. You don't need me to tell you that the world is awash in strife and tension and divisiveness. Our country, America, is awash in strife and division and tension. And it wears on us. It causes us a degree of stress and strain and anxiety. So people have been asking me to make some comments, to give some insights that may be helpful for people in terms of how to handle what we're going through. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. I want to begin with the gospel reading for today. It's from the 11th chapter of Matthew's gospel. And I have to confess, for a long time, I didn't know if I believed what Jesus was saying. Now I do. Come to me, all you who toil and are burdened, and I shall give you rest. Take my yoke upon yourself and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you shall find rest. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. All right. I'm going to start with a story, something that happened to me literally over 40 years ago, in the early to mid 80s. I had just finished graduate school, received my master's degree in clinical psychology, and already had a master's degree in theology from the University of Notre Dame. And our country was in the midst of a steep recession. The interest rate was much higher than it is now, and I couldn't find a job. So I got a job because I had to make money driving taxi cab. Remember those big box-like yellow sunshine cabs? That's what I drove in the city of Pittsburgh. And a friend of mine who was a Catholic priest said that there was a position opening in the Diocese of Pittsburgh for the director of the Office of Marriage and Family Life. And he said, you would be perfect for that job with your background and so forth. So I applied, and I actually got an interview. And the priest interviewing me, I really liked him. But about halfway through the interview, he said, I have to stop. He said, the bishop probably already has some neophyte priests lined up for this position. So I just need to be upfront with you about that. There's no chance that you'll get this job. And secondly, he said to me, the Catholic Church just isn't ready for someone like you. Well, I was really frustrated. And I said to him, what am I supposed to do? And I'll never forget his response. He said, I don't know what you're supposed to do with your life. I have a hard enough time living my life and figuring my life out. I can't figure out your life. You'll have to do that yourself. Now, he could have been a bit more gentle, but he spoke a profound truth. His life was all that he could handle. He couldn't figure out my path forward. That was for me to do with God and with my spiritual community. Now, you may be saying, what does that have to do with the gospel reading? I'm going to focus on the last line. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. A yoke, that's something in Jesus' time that they would put on oxen who would then, move the plow through the field so they could plant their seeds, all right? And each yoke was fit specifically for the dimensions of that particular ox. That's why when Jesus says, my yoke is easy, all right? If you go to the Greek, what the word easy means is well-fitting. My yoke is easy and is well-fitting, and my burden is light. This is what Jesus is trying to tell us, and this is, in a sense, what that priest was trying to tell us. If we take the yoke, the karma, the dharma, the task that God has just given us and no one else, the task that is specifically designed for us and no one else, then that yoke, that task, that responsibility does become easier over time because it's what God has designed for us, and God is giving us the strength, the energy, the grace, the wisdom to do what is specifically designed for us. All right. So what does this have to do with everything that's going on in our nation and the world? Now, I want you to hear everything I'm saying before you form a judgment. Maybe let me just say this. The more spiritually mature we are, the more enlightened we are, we learn to hold two truths simultaneously in a creative kind of tension. All right? So, it is not your yoke or my yoke. It is not your responsibility or my responsibility to try to take on all the burdens that we are facing in our country and that we are facing in the world. The yoke of the world does not belong to you and me. It belongs to God. God is the creator. God is the one that began the Big Bang, guided these diverse particles into atoms into molecules, and eventually molecules into living beings into mammals, and eventually mammals into human beings. God created the world, and God is ultimately responsible for the world. That is God's yoke, not yours and not mine. And when we take that yoke of the world on us, we will be overburdened. We will be stressed out. We will be filled with fear, anxiety, anger, burnout. We will have no peace because you and I cannot fix the world. It is not our burden. Now, this is the paradox, and this is the second truth. You got to hold these two truths together. Our first task is to give the world back to God. our first task is to give the burden of the world into the hands of God where it belongs. I'm going to say it this way. Our task is to surrender the world to God. Now, this surrender is a process. But if we are truly surrendering it to God, this is the grand paradox. We will have peace. We will have calmness. And then we will be open to God's guidance, to God's inspiration, to God's wisdom as to how we might make a difference in the world. Do you see that? We have to give the burden of the world to God. And then in that surrender, letting go, trusting God's providence. I want to read two quotes. The first one is from Yogananda, a great saint from India, and she's saying it from a particular perspective, but I think it's very helpful. The Divine Mother knows what is best. You and the world are under her protection. Whatever she does is for your good and the good of the world. And then I have a quote from a Jesuit from the 16th century, Pierre de Caussade, saying essentially the same thing that Yogananda said. All creatures, that means the whole world, all creatures live in the hands of God. The world is held in the hands of God. Faith sees that Jesus Christ lives in everything and works through all history to the end of time. Every fraction of a second contains a fragment of his secret activity. End of quote. Now, the rational mind cannot ultimately get what I'm trying to communicate and what these great figures are trying to communicate. The world belongs to God. And yes, we have free will. God gave us free will. And very often out of that free will, we create tremendous suffering for ourselves and each other. Yet God's free will is absolute. And what that means is that God can use all of our free will choices, all of them, even the most destructive ones. And God will eventually make good come out of everything. Paramahansa Yogananda talked about a world crisis that we would go through, and perhaps that's what we're going through right now. But then he made this interesting comment. He said, afterwards, America's going to be okay. We will be half as rich as we are now, but we will be twice as spiritual. See, God doesn't see things the way we see things. What God wants for us is to know who we are in God, that we are made in a divine image, that we are a reflection of God. We are a spark of the divine. And God wants the whole human race to come to that realization. And sometimes we only come to that through crisis. Sometimes we only come to that through suffering. So God is using everything, all of our choices, and again, even our idiotic choices, to bring good to you and me individually and to the arc of history. So again, our job is to surrender everything to God. And again, we know that we are delving into the depth of that surrender because we become more peaceful. We become more calm. And out of that peace and calm, then, as I said earlier, we are open to the inspiration of God. And then we actually become vehicles of healing in the world. But it's not because we take the yoke of the world on us. It's because we've given that yoke back to God. I'll share another story on a personal level. A number of years ago, I wrote Swami Nirvanananda, and those of you who who don't know Swami Nirvanananda. He's a saint-like figure. He's a monk in the Hindu tradition, but he loves Jesus and he loves St. Francis and Yogananda. And I wrote him this note, and I just said, I want to make sure that I get everything done before I leave the body, everything that I came to do, everything that God wants me to do. And I tried to say, ask him, do you have any hint of when that might be? And his response was very clear. He said, you will leave the body when God wants you to leave the body, not a minute before and not a minute after. Surrender even your future death to the hands of God, because it will all be perfect. All right? That's surrender. And again, it brings peace. So let me talk about how we can nurture that surrender. I want to give you a quote from Paramahansa Yogananda, and I will make sure it gets listed below so that you have access to it. Some of you have heard me quote Yogananda in this way many, many times. It's my favorite Yogananda quote. He says, God is love. His plan for creation is rooted only in love. Every saint who has penetrated to the core of reality testifies to a divine and universal plan that is beautiful and filled with joy. Again, that quote is going to be listed below. I'm going to ask you for the next 7 days to contemplate that quote, to read it every day, to think about it, but then to engage your feelings. What if that quote is true, first of all? How do you feel about it? See, when we surrender to the truth of God's love and providence, it instills that peace and that calm. Many, many, many years ago, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I taught religion at a Catholic high school, and I had freshmen. And I didn't have Yogananda's quote then, but I was trying to express this truth to them, that God is love. We live and move and have our being in God's love, and all things work together to serve our highest good. And I asked them to take a moment of silence to think about it. But then I asked them to feel it. What does that truth that I just expressed to you, how does it express itself in how you feel? And after a minute or two of doing that, I asked them, what are you feeling? And they all said something like this: it makes me feel safe. It makes me feel secure. It makes me feel happy. It makes me feel peace. So for the next 7 days, read that quote from Yogananda. Think about it, not just when you're meditating, not just when you're done meditating, but throughout the day. Think about it, contemplate it, and then try to feel it. And how does it inform your feelings? Secondly, I'm going to go to a quote from Jesus. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the darkest hour of his life. Just think, he's in the prime of his life. He can turn water into wine. He can raise the dead. And he's being asked to surrender his life in a very difficult way. And I'm not going to get into the why of that right now. But Jesus' prayer was very profound. He said, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thy will. When it's either your personal life or all the craziness in the world, when it's overwhelming you, pray that prayer of Jesus, not my will, but thy will be done. You can do a simple translation: as you wish, as you wish, as you wish. It's a prayer of surrender. We're not surrendering into nothing. We're not surrendering into oblivion. We are surrendering into God's love, which will then give us peace. And in the context of that peace and calm, we can receive God's wisdom, guidance, strength, help, and encouragement. The last piece of practice that I want to give you. I've talked about it before, but it's very powerful. When you see the craziness in the world or in your own life, don't ask why. That just engages the ego. And the ego loves that question. But it's a question that the ego can't answer, because one why will lead to another why, which will lead to another why. Don't get into the why. Just ask, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to learn from this situation? What is your will for me in this situation? What do you want me to learn? What can I do? What is your will? Ask that in faith, and again, in that spirit of surrender. And God's guidance, God's intuition, God's strength will bubble up. I want to thank you for joining us today. I really deeply appreciate your presence, your love, and your support. God bless you.